Hi, this is Chris Newson. Welcome to the Root Cause Analysis Podcast, where we'll take our listeners right to the heart of the important EHS issues. We're coming to you live from Woodland Grange, a conference and hotel venue in the Midlands. I'm now joined on the podcast by Martin Baxter, the Deputy CEO of IEMA, who are the Institute of Environmental and Management Assessment. Hello, Martin. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Wonderful to be on the podcast with you, Chris.
Excellent. And really, sincerely, thanks for giving up your time. I know you're very busy, lots of things going on at IEMA at the moment. So we really do appreciate you sparing this time to talk to me, but really importantly, to talk to our members. So thank you. So we've got a few questions we're going to go through. We're going to sort of focus on you and on IEMA and changes, and then sustainability as a whole. That's the plan anyway. We'll see where the conversation goes. So we'll start with question one. So would you mind just introducing yourself, please, and just talking about sort of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, I'm Martin Baxter. I'm Deputy Chief Exec at IEMA, and strangely, this because I don't come across many people, but I've been at the organisation for over 30 years, which is quite a long stint. So I actually started in 1992. I had done a master's in environmental assessment and management, and as you come to the end of that, I was looking at what do I do as a dissertation, and it so happened that the institute was quite close to where what became my future wife kind of lived. So I got in touch with them and said, is there anything that I can do in relationship to a dissertation that would be relevant? And the institute was really young at the time. It had only just been established. So they said yes, and I got my feet under the door. I did my dissertation with them, then started doing other bits and pieces, and eventually got into being taken on to do a role and develop my career initially in the environmental impact assessment work. So reviewing environmental impact statements for local authorities. Also at the time, actually, I started running a user group of organisations, people who were at the forefront of implementing environmental management systems. So back in the day, it was BS 7750. So I had a user group of different sectors and was pulling together insights and help and support. And from that, we used that as an opportunity to influence the development of ISO 14001 and some of the supporting standards. And then, so my career then moved a little bit more into wider environmental management. Then later down the line, I was running the Environmental Auditors Registration Association. I'll come on to that a bit when we kind of maybe think about some of the history of IEMA. Ran our professional standards program. And so I've had various job titles within the organisation, from head of professional standards, technical director, policy director, because I did kind of moved around a little bit, to where I am now. So I joined the board of IEMA quite a long time ago. So I'm one of the exec directors on the board of the organisation. My current role is as Deputy Chief Exec. So I do a lot of external engagement with government here in the UK, with companies in particular, speaking to boards. I chair a group in the International Standards Organisation, ISO, responsible for 14001. So I have 100 countries in my committee, which is an interesting meeting to chair.
Wow.
I'm also on the board of the Society for the Environment, so I'm a non-exec on there, and I chair their Audit and Risk Committee. I'm also on the board of the Broadway Initiative, so that's a collaboration across a group of trade associations and some of the professional bodies and NGOs. And it's great that Make UK is also one of the partners with the Broadway Initiative. So I helped to set that up, and I'm on the board there. And I'm a visiting professor in sustainability at Cranfield University. So that's a little bit about me and what I've been up to over what seems like a hell of a long time, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, Martin, there's lots to unpack there. I mean, first of all, I said at the beginning, very, rather flippantly, thanks for joining us. I'm sure you're very busy. I mean, I think you've illustrated there how busy you might be. So yeah, it's very lots of different things going on. I mean, just one thing you mentioned there is, and I think you said something like this: someone being at an organisation for sort of 25, 30 years is quite rare, isn't it? In my experience, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, because particularly, it's a relatively small organisation still. We only employ, just under 50 people. But I've been really lucky that my role has developed, partly because I pushed it. And every time you think, okay, I need a new challenge, actually, I've been able to create that challenge in the organisation. Yeah. So, when we first started, we weren't an international organisation. We didn't have tens of thousands of members. We weren't speaking to government here, there, and everywhere. We weren't, an observer organisation with the UNFCCC or any of that. So I've been really lucky that IEMA has helped me to fulfill, if you like, an opportunity to I describe it as how can I catalyze change at scale and pace.
Yeah. Okay.
So, being able to influence primary legislation, did a lot of work on the Environment Act, and we also, well over a decade ago, we did a lot of work with government to bring greenhouse gas emissions reporting into the Companies Act. So our evidence was critical to looking at the costs and benefits on that. Similarly with 14,001, there's content there from the last edition in 2015 that we really pushed from an IEMA perspective, and I was UK national expert in the development of that standard, but it's used by, over 500,000 companies in 200 countries around the world. So, if you want Absolutely. To feed your ambition, then IEMA is a great place to be.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, yeah. And, above all else, it must be, what's the word? It must be a nice place to work, right? It must be rewarding. You've been there that long, so must be good.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been certified as a great place to work, and we do work really hard on developing that culture and, being as good a team as we possibly can. And there's no day that goes by when I'm not either inspired by my colleagues and they're helping and supporting others in the organisation to do the best we possibly can.
So that's a great feeling. I feel very similar about the Make UK in general, the team I work with. So it's good, very rewarding. Okay, so going on from that, then I wonder if you can just tell us a bit more about IEMA, the history, where you are now, what it all means. And I'll just preface that with, I think, the people we speak to, a lot of people will see IEMA as almost like, they're this organisation that all the training courses come from. And I've done IEMA this course and IEMA that course. And perhaps that's as much as their exposure is to IEMA. They don't know all the other stuff. You've touched on it a little bit there, but all the other stuff that IEMA does. So perhaps you can, tell us a bit about the history and then what IEMA is all about, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So the way I describe it is to encapsulate who we are, first of all, is we're a professional body of sustainability and environmental professionals. Our members work in all sectors of the economy. So we have members who work in manufacturing, in infrastructure, in the built environment. They work in finance, they work in government, they work in consultancy, they work in retail, they work in agriculture, food and drink. They work, we got members in all sectors of the economy, and we got members in about 130 countries around the world. So we've got about 22,000 individuals and 300 corporate partners. And it's really, I'm going to say it's really, really simple. The first thing we say is that the more members we have doing the right thing, the bigger contribution we can make to a more sustainable future. So we want to grow our membership. Secondly, the more competent the individuals are and the more skilled they are, the bigger impact they can individually make in their organizations to drive that agenda further and faster. So upskilling and supporting people to be the best that they can be to drive a sustainable future is a critical element of it. And then the third thing is, how can we change the rules of the game to drive sustainability further, faster and harder. And that's where the advocacy comes in with government, with standards, with using the experience and expertise that we have within our membership to say, we can do better. But in order to do better, we need to do things differently, and driving that change is really important. So training people is absolutely critical to that. Being advocates for, progressive policy that helps us to go where we need to be, we see as being crucial. And generating more members and enthusiasm for this is also critical. So when I rewind, when I last year we celebrated 25 years of IEMA. So we actually constituted the organisation back in 1999, September 1999, and it was basically a merger of three entities. So there was an Institute of Environmental Assessment, and that was for corporate members, largely organisations that were involved in either delivering impact assessments or commissioning them or reviewing them and making decisions on development projects on the basis of that. IEA had also established something called the Environmental Auditors Registration Association. So that was individuals who were doing audits, and that could be anything from management system audits, but also crucially, pollution prevention audits, and over time, emissions trading scheme auditors and people like that. And then there was a separate organisation based in Scotland, which was the Institute of Environmental Management. And so towards the late 90s, we brought those three entities together to form IEMA. So that was kind of the genesis of it. And actually, there's a nice little bit of history here back with Mate UK, because in the mid-90s, when we had our training programs and we were working with different training course providers, a predecessor of Mate UK, so the Engineering Employers Federation, EEF, was running our associate certificate program in environmental management in that new entity, was part of that journey to become IEMA. So we've been working together as organisations for 30 years or so, and it's great to have such a strong relationship. So and it's really nice of you to say that, Martin, and I'd echo that. I mean, the relationship we have is second to none. I mean, we speak to a variety of different people at IEMA all the time, and I think we both ask each other, the organisations both ask each other, opinions and questions, what's really going on out there, that sort of stuff. So I'd echo that. It's been as you say, in terms of time, it's a relationship that sort of started almost at the same place, and it's blossomed definitely 100%. And like you, we've gone through those transitions from being EEF to Make UK. If you look at different parts of our organisations, they've changed shape and moved and so on and come back together. Brings with it some challenges, as you know, I'm sure. Okay. So, and I think, so one of the things that we recognised is that, the landscape that we're working in has changed quite significantly, and therefore the work that our members has been doing has changed as well. So when we look forward and think, well, where do we want to go as an organisation, then change is afoot. Let me put it like that.
Okay. Well, okay, right. So that's you've put what's the correct term? A breadcrumb down there, Martin. I'm gonna pick it up. So you've talked about upcoming change and things happening, and it could be that people have read different things that have been published and know a little bit about that. But can you tell us more about the sort of the upcoming changes? And
sure.
I'm particularly interested in what they are, the impact that it has, and I think that the process that you've had to go through to get there, I think is interesting, and I think our listeners and watchers will agree.
Yeah. So I mean, we recognise that the world has changed, and if I look at the work that our members actually do, it's expanded dramatically. So the number of topics has kind of increased, bringing in things like the net zero transition, climate change adaptation, circular economy, but then also we've got members who are working on modern slavery, labour standards, kind of bringing in ethics, people, that whole way in which the breadth of issues that sustainability brings has kind of been taken on by people who were and are part of our membership. And also it's become a much more strategic issue for organisations. So there, not only have we seen that widening of scope, but also a raising of ambition and pushing into the C-suite and that. And what we found is that our name and our heritage doesn't really encapsulate now in a clear way where things are and where things are heading. So it's best part of 2 years ago, we started looking at, okay, well, what is our purpose and what do we need to do that, to look at that. So we've had loads of engagement with members. We ran focus groups, we ran workshops, really to just listen to, what they thought our purpose was and should be and what it would need to be in, 2030, 2035. So kind of having a bit of a future proof, a longer look and saying, what's the work going to look like further down the line? And then from that, we recognised that there was this disconnect between what our members said our purpose should be and is, and the work that they do and our name. So then we started to look at different naming options. We tested them with the members. We asked them, well, what resonates with you, what doesn't? And then finally, we came to a process where we said, right, okay, well, here are 4 different name options, one of which is our existing name. What do you think? Tested those out, and there was one that stood out in terms of member preferences, and so that was the one that we put to an extraordinary general meeting of the members at the back end of last year. Now it's quite interesting. I should have said actually I wear the company's company secretary hat in IEMA, so they kind of this formal process of changing our name needed 2 things. So one was a special resolution of the members, and that requires 75% of people who vote from within the membership to support a change, because it's classed as a special resolution under the Companies Act. So that's kind of quite a high threshold to do that. Secondly, because the word institute is a protected title and is classed as a sensitive word under the Companies Act, not any organisation can choose to call themselves an institute. We actually had to get permission from the Secretary of State for Business and Trade. And it's a little bit opaque about how they exactly make the decision. And it took me forever, to be honest, to find out actually who is the person who makes either gives the advice to the Secretary of State, or how does this decision actually get made? And eventually, I bumped into somebody who worked for DBT, and I said, look, can you help me? Because I'm just really, really struggling here. And I'd been speaking to a Director General in DEFRA, actually, and they'd been trying to find out, and they were hitting a blank. And anyway, the upshot was that they pointed me in the direction of somebody in Companies House who was the person who was the expert. And actually, Companies House acts as the Secretary of State. So as well as registering companies, they also act as the Secretary of State. So then they explained, right, okay, well, what you need to do is to demonstrate why, this name is appropriate for you as an entity, and also demonstrate a level of support. Well, clearly, partly the level of support is from the members, but also I did a lot of work to get letters of support from key organisations, both government and private sector and others, to really paint a picture of a wide range of activity of IEMA on not just the UK, but also on a global scale, that demonstrated that we should become the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals. So we had our EGM in December. We passed the voting threshold. I think we had, I'm just trying to think, it was about 2,500, 3,000 members engaged in the actual vote, so not insubstantial. Really pleasing to see that. We met the voting threshold, then we wrote to Companies House to get the name change, and that went through. there was a slight, when I say hiccup, because as well I had to write for an exemption from using the word limited at the end of our name. So if you register as a company, you're a company that's limited. We're a company limited by a guarantee, so had to just work through that as well. And because we'd originally been constituted under the 85 Companies Act, not the 2006 Companies Act, so they needed to get some legal advice themselves. Anyway, all sailed through, and on the, I think it was the 8th of January this year, 2025, name changed as a legal thing. Now, you can't say, can we change our name and can we have it going into effect from, I don't know, 6th of April 2025? Yeah. It doesn't work like that. It's like they just process your application, and whenever it's processed, and so long as it just goes on the register, ta-da. So then you think, right, okay, well, that's great. Now we've got a pile of work to do, which is on our brand and our identity, because you've got to change your kind of logo. And then when you start to look at that, there's lots and lots of things that need to change. You've got to notify banks and insurance and contracts and HMRC and just like, and so we have a long list of things that we are organizations that we need to either formally notify, or all the things around compliance, because legally you have to have your company name, and that you're a company limited by guarantee, and that you're registered in England and Wales, and your company number and your address on your website. Well, lots of websites don't comply, but put my company's company secretary hat back on, and it's like, well, we need to make sure that we comply. So we've been doing a lot of work on the compliance aspect at the same time as running in parallel a check with members on some design concepts for our brand. And we've got a preference from members that was quite clear. So we're moving ahead with that and looking forward to launching in full our new look and feel and pressing ahead. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting times, and as you've illustrated there, lots going on, and there's lots of things people don't, unless you've been through that name change, you don't realize all of those things. So I know we were talking before, about, those I know you gave the members options in the end, but you have to be very careful, don't you, when you think about the organizational name. When it then gets distilled into 4 letters, you've got to just make sure that all works,
Yeah, I mean, it's just testing, how do these acronyms play out, and the post-nominals after people's names. And, at the moment, I'm a fellow of IEMA, so I'm an FIEMA. So you kind of run those through different things and you check on the internet, but also you just got to be mindful, if we'd have become the Institute of Sustainability Specialists, then if you're a practitioner member, well, that could have been a nightmare. So you just got to, work through these things, and hopefully we don't trip up. So,
Very good. Yeah.
Testing all these things out is just like bizarre. It's fun as well.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure you know this, but from our own experience of changing our name, well, longer than I sort of feels like it is now. We went from EEF to Make UK. It's really important to tell people, isn't it? And I know that sounds really simple, but it is easy to get sort of wound up in all everything you've just explained that you have to do. It's very complicated, and then you think, well, we've got. I know you're doing this very well. I'm not saying you're not, but you've got to tell the members, right, that your name's changed and why and all those sorts of things. So that's critical, isn't it? Because they are the most important people in all of this. Perhaps, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, there's various things. So one is, of course, we need members to know where we are on this journey. So what we've said in the interim is we're going to do all the compliance related stuff. But we're still going to call ourselves IEMA until we launch that new name and brand, until we actually kind of launch things. So, and then, we'll be coming out to people and explaining, this is what it means in practice. This is how we're now going to refer ourselves. We probably will try not to use our acronym very much, so that people really understand, because I think our new name, the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals, really describes the organization. It describes the work that members are doing, and I think from my perspective it's really, really important that people really get that I'm going to say ram down their throats, but it's like, this is the thing that people really need to kind of latch onto.
Yeah.
And certainly when I've spoken to people who are not members, they find they can relate much more to the organisation just through that name change. We will still have that connection back to IEMA, because I know, it will still be known. You will be running training programs that, in the future, that people will have booked on thinking they were coming on to an IEMA course, and it'll be the same course initially, but it might be that at the end of it, they get a slightly different certificate when we get to that point. So we're conscious that we do need to provide that connection back to our heritage so that people can find us. Equally, we've got guidance. Last year we were cited in the Supreme Court judgment on the Surrey oil wells case, so the Finch court judgment, and the methodology that we'd published on how to assess the significance of greenhouse gas emissions from new development projects under EIA. Our guidance has been used in all the big contentious cases, so whether it's Cumbrian coal mine, various things, because we've always been really consistent that you have to assess the effects of burning fossil fuels that are extracted, and the interpretation of planning law said that you didn't. And we always found that this was absolutely peculiar. Right. And it all went through to the Supreme Court last year, and the judgment was, well, of course it to assess the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the fuels that you're extracting, and that immediately paid to that project. It paid to an oil and gas project at Biscathorpe in Lincolnshire. It did the Cumbrian coal mine. The government said, well, we can't defend the case that's now going back into court because we erred in law in the way in which you interpreted things. It put the kibosh on Rosebank. And so that was again. So it's really so. But everybody knows that as the IEMA guidance. So of course we will have things out there where we are cited. So we need to kind of bring things along over time into new brand and new editions and all the rest of it. So
and I know I'm sure clearly there's a plan and timescales, and I'm sure not all the I's are dotted and T's crossed, but you're working through that. I certainly know we've had conversations just last week with people from IEMA, particularly around the name, the post-nominals and course names and certificates, and it's really, I mean, being really honest here, it's really it's very effective for an organisation to ask one of its bigger training providers, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And that's exactly what happens. That was a really good conversation last week.
Oh, well, that's really nice to hear, because I think one of the things that I've been really proud of the organisation and the team of colleagues who've really driven this is just that they've put engagement and collaboration with members and our stakeholders right at the heart of this through everything that we've done. So it's really been, they always say, kind of, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and kind of spend twice as time listening than speaking. And we've really been about how do we get the feedback from people to help inform. And of course, what we think it does as well is it binds people to the organisation as well, because you think, oh yeah, you're asking us, we're taking into account, and I feel part of it, and that's great, because we want to create this big movement of people who are doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and as I say, that's visible all the way along, as far as I can see. So a real nuts and bolts type question that comes out of all of that, and it's a real question that we've had members, students, etc., ask us, and it's sort of relatively simplistic, which is, at the moment I've got these letters after my name. I know the organisation's changing its name. What does that mean? Do I have to just put a P in front of the new name and just add that? So I'm just interested in what the procedure is for that.
Yeah, and it's a good question. The key thing is that we're just getting all of the brand materials in place. So we have our purpose statement and the way in which we will describe the entity. We will have a new logo. When people talk to me about brand, I always think logo, but then I get told that brand is much more than what. So I know all that, but I like to boil it down to simplistic things. But we need to change the look and feel of both how we communicate and how we look. And then as part of that as well, it's how do people describe themselves, and that the post-nominals that go at the end of people's name to signify their membership status will be part of that. So all of that is part of the rollout of that new name. So one of the things that, we've been working with the team, and we said, right, okay, what are the things that we need on day one of launching the new brand? So website's got to look right. So that's changing all the pages, all the colors, all the language and things like that. We also need the post-nominals so that people know, and we also need to be issuing certificates under the new name and the new brand as well from that day forward. And so that's kind of like, so when you start like saying, right, okay, well, yes, there are some things that we can phase in, but there are some things that we need as right at the front of this. And those post-nominals will be one of those things that's right at the front.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That's completely, you've got to have a date from which, if you get your qualification, think about qualifications, if you get your qualification after this date, the certificate will look like this, that's, and it could have been when you started your, practitioner certificate that it was IEMA, and now it's, something else. So as you've said there, as long as it's clear, I mean, it's a transition, isn't it? Everyone knows where they are. Okay. And as part of that, in terms of the name change and the post-nominals thing is a very important thing, but it's there's lots of stuff going on here. What impact do you think or hope perhaps that the name change will have on members, themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So one is, I think it will be much more relatable to other people.
Right.
In terms of, I'm a member of the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals. Okay, so you're a sustainability and environmental professional. Great. Okay.
Right.
If you say I'm a member of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, what does that actually say about you and your work? And so there's that kind of a slightly difficult. You shouldn't have to explain as much. What does that mean, and therefore the work? So that, and we think that that's really important because we want to really push the influence of our members. And when you look at many other professions, I'm a chartered accountant, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a surveyor. It's like, well, okay, so I'm an environmental professional. It's about you, not the subject area. So it's like, it's about both, but it's conveying both the subject area and the fact that you are a professional in this, and that there is a profession behind all of this, I think is really important. And then we also expect that it will give us much better opportunity, particularly internationally, to grow the membership as well, because it's more relatable. And certainly the discussions that I've had when I've been, overseas, speaking to people from different parts of the world. So, if you say to them, like, we're a membership association for people who are working in as sustainability and environmental professionals, they say, oh, that's great. What does this IEMA mean? They can't, and then you say, well, what does it stand for? And you explain and say, well, how does that relate to what you've just been telling me? So you get into this weird conversation, which, frankly, I could do without, because I want to focus on the things that I want to. So I think that those things will really help to raise the profile of the profession and bind it together, and make it more relatable, and therefore we grow the membership.
Brilliant. I completely get that. I mean, like we said earlier on, having gone through the change from EEF to Make UK, and I, as you're saying there, I've had that question. We all have here. What does the EEF stand for? And then you've got to explain it, and then it slightly changes, and then you've got to re-educate everyone. And it's quite obvious what Make UK is about. It's, the manufacturing trade body of the UK. So, it says what it is. And that's the same principle here. I mean, in my experience, when people are talking about IEMA, they just say IEMA, don't they? They don't go into, the Institute of Environmental, etc. So you never know what it is unless you know already. So
but quite a lot of people do ask me that, and that's why.
I'm sure.
It's like, and then they see because you have to write out your name in full on your website and places like that, and in legal documents and on invoices, receipts, purchase orders, any formal communication. the law says that you have to write it out in full. So
Yeah.
that's when you start to be clear about, you have to be a little bit clearer about, that identity.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I get it. Perfect. Okay, so a couple of last questions now, and we're going to broaden out a bit from IEMA in particular, and just talk about sustainability as a wider subject. So, first of all, where do you see the field of sustainability going? Let's say in the next, I don't know, short term, long term, like maybe the next 12 months, next 5 years. What are going to be the big things that are going to come along in sustainability?
yeah, fantastic question. And actually, we're doing some research at the moment. So this week, I've been speaking to chief executive, a major UK company, about this very thing, as well as sustainability leaders in lots of different sectors, as part of some research that IEMA is about to publish in the next couple of months. And I think what's been really heartening is that, because we're living in turbulent times, that's not kind of beat around the bush, but we also know that the challenges aren't going away. So we know that the weather events that we're seeing are the least extreme that we'll see in our lifetimes, that the climate risks are growing faster than our ability to adapt, and so we're becoming less resilient and more vulnerable to the changes that we know are coming. We also know that there's going to be 1 billion people more on the planet between now and 2050. So pressure on materials, resources, food, and natural systems is just going to get more. So breaking the link between economic activity and that is critical. And I think, and certainly speaking to people this week, it's coming through loud and clear that this agenda won't go away. And I was really heartened. So I was at COP29 in Baku, and we were speaking with the Director General of the International Chamber of Commerce. And he was very, very clear. His view was that, look, the net zero train has left the station and business is on it, and we're not going to go into reverse. He said we might have slight kind of slowdowns and accelerations as political change waxes and wanes, but it's really clear that we're going in this direction. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, and I was kind of reading up actually earlier this week, is despite all the things that are coming out from the US, there is still an expectation that emissions in the US will continue to fall, because coal will continue to come off the US energy system because it's inefficient. Okay.
Different motivation.
Exactly. And this is about, how do you drive the economy? How do you drive economic growth? We're very, very clear that you can break the link between a growing economy and one that is more productive and generates more wealth, and at the same time reduces impacts on the environment and on kind of wider society. The UK has been able to demonstrate that very, very clearly. Since 1990, when you look at the size of the economy, it's much, much bigger. And you look at our greenhouse gas emissions, not just those directly here in the UK, but also from the mid-2000s, imported emissions have also been going down as well. So in total, our impact on climate has in absolute terms been reducing at the same time as our economy is growing. We need more people to recognise that that's possible. It hasn't changed the way in which people have to live and work. So we think that you bring those things together and actually create a positive future that is predicated on sustainability and a greener economy. And some of it is going to be difficult, and we have to work through that. But some of it is actually really innovative, exciting. We're both being powered by electricity at the moment, and the molecules that are coming through, I'd like them to be kind of generated through renewables rather than coal or gas. Pretty simple, really, and we can do it
when you put it like that.
Yeah, so I think it's really, I think we've got if not all, then absolutely the majority of the solutions that we need. So then it becomes about how do we organize ourselves and structure our economic activity in order to get us to where we need to be. So that requires really things that are really difficult, actually, working in partnership, in collaboration. So for us, when we think about skills, and we've got our IEMA sustainability skills map, which will become the ISEP sustainability skills map, and we're reviewing it at the moment, but actually there are some critical kind of pointers in there about how do you drive effectiveness for a sustainable future. And yes, we need people to know and understand the fundamentals of sustainability to be in the profession. Yes, we want people to understand some of the laws, regulations, some of the principles, some of the tools like management systems and LCA and things like that. But critically, if you need to package all of that knowledge and insight and skill with the ability to drive change. So whether it's the ability to work in partnership and collaboration as an individual, your communication skills, your leadership skills, your analytical thinking, and be able to see kind of the broader systems and connect things. Actually, that's kind of how things get done. And so for us to build those rounded professionals who can really drive change, well, we need the change-making skills as well as what is it that we're going to technically change, bring them together, and off we go.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly find that fascinating, that bit, because my background's in health and safety, and it's a very sort of similar in a way that we've got to sell that idea. It doesn't instinctively make you lots of money, right? So business, you've got to sell it to business. Health and safety is quite straightforward. There's a moral implication, but the more people you hurt and the more health issues you create, it is going to cost you money, and there's lots of different ways to look at that. But instinctively, and I'm not an environmental professional, obviously, at all. I say obviously, but instinctively you would imagine reducing your impacts on the environment doesn't go hand in hand with economic growth, and in fact costs you lots of money. But actually, that's not the case, as you've just demonstrated with the numbers.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the differences. I sometimes have, let's say, heated debates with people who come from a health and safety background or who have an EHS role, because I think what the distinguishing factor for me between health and safety and environment sustainability is that health and safety is largely about stopping things going wrong.
Yes.
So it's about, I want to prevent harm to people. Perfect. Yeah. Absolutely crystal clear. And from an environment sustainability perspective, yes, we want to prevent harm to the environment. But actually, what we're also looking to do is drive restorative processes. And actually, we can see how by doing this and reshaping how we do business, we can create value added, not just protecting what we've got. And I think there's the opportunity that comes from that is a changed mindset. So whereas if you've got good health and safety performance, that gets you through the gate in order to bid for work. Fantastic. But it doesn't generally help you to win more work because you're adding more value to your customer. You're just saying, I'm not going to hurt people. Whereas what we are seeing is organizations who are able to demonstrate how they can be part of a bigger solution to driving progressive change on sustainability and environment. And that does help them to win work over their competitors. So I think that's where there's a little bit of a change, a difference in some of the characteristics that you need in a team around people who are going to drive value creation and what's the added value from these programs, as well as we're going to manage the things that could go wrong. So it's I think it's really exciting.
I agreed. Yeah. And my last question, I mean, you started to cover it there, but my last question was simply about competency. How important you think competency is in terms of driving that change that you're talking about through. So just sort of, what do you think about that?
Well, it's something that's really dear to my heart. I mentioned I'm on, well, obviously IEMA is kind of at the heart is about, driving competency. I'm on the board of Society for the Environment. I'm a chartered environmentalist. I'm a fellow of IEMA. And the reason I think it's really important is that there are really big decisions that need to be made on an ongoing basis to factor in a hell of a lot of complexity. So there are decisions that are being made in boardrooms and in companies around the UK, around the world today, that will lock them into the wrong future, because they will not have brought all of this sustainability thinking into the way in which they're going to create a better future for their own business, because they haven't got the insight. And I think you look at the amount of money that's going into the transition to our power system, in the way in which businesses are looking at carbon capture and storage, they're looking at hydrogen, they're looking at what do we need to do to recover materials, to recycle, to upcycle, to make sure that we can maximize economic value from our materials multiple times over, rather than taking them out of the ground, using them for a bit and dumping them. And all of this is both complex, but also comes with potentially a big price tag.
Yeah.
Why would you not want somebody competent who's helping to steer you as a business and navigate your way through to optimize for the best outcomes? I mean, come on, it's pretty straightforward. So we play with the state of our environment at our peril if we are, you are literally playing with fire. We've seen it in Los Angeles. So what we really need to do is ensure that it's competent and capable people that are helping to drive the change that we want to see.
Yeah, perfect. And I don't know if you agree with this, or if you have sight of this, but certainly at a grassroots level, there is still around this thing about, right, I've got a health and safety manager, just because it's well established and they've been around for a long time and it's pretty obvious what health and safety is about, including the title. I've got a health and safety manager. I'm going to ask them to just handle our environmental stuff as well. And overnight they go from being a H&S manager to an EHS manager, and sustainability is not even mentioned in the title. So I do, and it may work the other way as well. You might have an environmental manager that gets asked to handle the rest, and they're different, as you've highlighted there, they're different competencies, aren't they? And you've got to have the right skills in each area, and there are transferable skills like being able to influence, as you've said already, influence up and down. But there are other things as well, and yes, I mean that's absolutely perfect what you said. Why would you put the operation of something so important in the hands of someone that didn't know what they were doing, basically, or hadn't got the competency, let's say. Yeah. Interesting, excellent. Well, Martin, I think we've well gone over the allotted time, but that's all good, because there isn't really an allotted time, so that's good. But it's been excellent. So just remains for me to say thank you very much for your time. I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. Hope you have. And thank you. I'm sure our members have found it useful as well.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed that chat.
Cool. Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and I'll see you on the next one.